Good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday. Welcome back to Rising. Guess who my co-host is today? The great Rachel Bovard. Welcome, Rachel. Great to have you.
So good to be here. It's ladies' night at the morning show. Happy to be with you. We have an awesome show planned for everybody today. We've got Roger Fisk and Lauren Tomlinson in for Team Rising, plus Matt Stoller's coming to discuss Facebook's handling of New York University researchers who are looking into Facebook's privacy policies.
And we have Lily Jamali. She's with us. She's going to weigh in on the expansion of the Dixie Fire in California. But first, we wanted to discuss some new polling. A new Quinnipiac poll finds that President Biden's approval when it comes to the handling of COVID is tanking. Now, according to the poll, Biden's handling of COVID dipped from a 65% approval rating back in May to 53%.
We've also seen Biden's overall approval rating take a dip, with 46% approving of his job performance, and that's down from 49% in May. Now, Kim, to me, this is not altogether too surprising in the sense of, we all thought COVID was going to be behind us, right? That's what the Biden administration was pushing very, very hard. This vaccination push lead up to July 4th, right? If you get a vaccine, if everybody gets vaccinated, we can all have backyard barbecues and we can all go back to normal life. And, we're seeing some of that walked back. And now the blame is being put on, people who haven't gotten vaccinated, but even people who have. You're seeing the administration's own public health officials come out and say, well, we think vaccinated people can still spread the virus, but we're not sure. And sort of every day it's a little bit of a new message, and obviously governors and mayors are responding to that around the country. And to me, that's, a big issue for Americans. That's something that affects their lives every day when they go outside their house. So I think that that's a big issue kind of playing in these approval polls.
I don't know when politicians are going to learn not to open up their big mouths when it comes to this virus and the pandemic. I mean, why don't they just say, listen, we're going to see how it goes, and we're going to, we don't know. This is a new virus. We don't know what's going to happen. Let's just leave it up to the epidemiologists, the scientists, and the virologists, and, we'll just keep people posted and updated. But, when Trump came out and said it's going to be gone by Easter, right? And then Joe Biden comes out and says the vaccine's going to get rid of all of this. And then it doesn't happen. No politician, no matter which side of the aisle they're on, this is proving that nobody's immune. If you make promises to the American people, which I know politicians love to do, and they're used to breaking those promises. So for them, they're like, oh, I'll just throw another promise out there. No big deal. I guess if it doesn't go through, I'll recover somehow. But, look, we didn't know what was going to happen. We still don't know what's going to happen with this thing. And it's just frustrating that they keep making these promises and then people get upset. And then people, of course, start blaming one another rather than just saying, look, this is a virus, that it's an unknown virus. We don't know what it's going to do, where it's going to go, how this is going to go.
No, I think that's exactly right. You're seeing, that's the nature of public health. But I think that's what's made this debate so frustrating is that from the beginning, no one was willing to acknowledge the uncertainty that did exist. I mean, that was what was so stunning about sort of the release of Fauci's emails was that you actually saw that he was uncertain about some of these questions. But instead of acknowledging that, and treating Americans like adults, who can handle that kind of uncertainty, he went out and was like, this is absolutely true, and this is masks are absolutely not effective or effective. A vaccine's going to wipe away the virus, or you're still going to get it, but it's not going to be as bad. All of these things. The virus came from a lab, or it didn't come from a lab. And some of that, I think, is understandable. To your point, this is a new virus. It's evolving. But they shut down any debate. They shut down any dissent. And now we're in a situation where, like you said, we have to walk back things that were overtly promised when maybe they shouldn't have been. But, I think it's interesting in this poll that Biden did better with women at 55% versus men at only 36%. And I think this actually kind of gets to sort of the gender breakdown about risk. Because that's what we're dealing with in this pandemic, right? Is people kind of deciding how they're going to go out and live their life. And I think men are typically like a little bit more like, let me make the choice. And women are like, we have to protect everybody. But I don't know.
Yeah.
The two women on the show should obviously have an opinion about this.
I mean, I can definitely see that. It's interesting to me when they say when people cite and say, well, I just don't like the handling of the pandemic. I really am curious what specifically they don't like. Is it specifically that they're not liking being forced, or is it specifically that they're thinking people should be forced more? But I think that the fact that men are disapproving of Biden more, it makes me believe that it's actually people are feeling like there's too many promises being made, too much control, and nothing actually, and then we're rolling back, saying, okay, now you're free, and then no, now you're not free anymore, and oh, now you're free again, and then wait, hold on, no, you're not. So it does kind of make me think that that's actually what's really the sentiment, but I'm sure it's probably different per person. If they just generally asked, do you not like his handling of the coronavirus pandemic? They said, yeah, that's the issue. Then that doesn't really dig into what specifically.
Yeah, and the poll doesn't get into that, to your point. It's a general approval poll that just asks the straight question. So, we don't have that answer, which I think your point is well taken in that regard.
Well, and it doesn't look like Biden's ratings are going to be returning back to the honeymoon stage anytime soon, because Anthony Fauci said yesterday that the Delta variant is on the rise, and you could expect to see the cases double in the coming weeks, with a projected 200,000 cases a day. Wow.
I can't with this guy. I'm going to be totally honest. So this is my thing. Yes, cases are rising, which is decoupled from the death rate. And this is what I think we should be talking about, that nobody, our public health officials do not seem to be talking about. Because if you go back and you look at the development of this vaccine, this was what was promised. It was never going to make, cure everybody from COVID. It was going to make the virus less deadly. Maybe the only time I'll ever defend a pharmaceutical company, they actually did say this in the beginning. They were like, these vaccines aren't going to cure everyone, but they are going to make it very difficult to get COVID. And if you do get it, it will not be fatal. You will not die. That was the goal. And in my mind, much of that goal has been achieved. If you look at death rates plummeting across the country, that is amazing. It's amazing that we got 3 vaccines as fast as we did that have, been as effective as they have been. But yet we still have this, mongering about cases. And of course, cases are an issue, but death rates and hospitals overcrowding, those were the 2 metrics that we were always supposed to watch for. And so why we can't talk about that is beyond me. I don't understand why we can't take the win in that regard.
Well, it started off that way. If you remember, in the very beginning of the pandemic, it was, we just don't want to overwhelm hospitals. And then the goalpost changed. It moved. And Nancy Pelosi, came out because, of course, she was trying to, it was political, trying to just counter Donald Trump at the time. But it was, that's not good enough. We are going to crush the virus. This is what we're going to crush the virus. And then moving the mentality of the American people from, we just don't want to overwhelm hospitals. We want to make sure we have enough ventilators for the people that need the ventilators when they need them. And suddenly it moves into this, we don't want to have cases and spread. And the bottom line is, cases don't matter at all, actually. I don't know how many cases of a common cold we have every single year circulating around. Same thing with influenza. We don't really know those numbers, and we don't really actually care. The numbers we care about are you getting severely sick to where you end up in the hospital and this ends up being something very deadly or debilitating for you? That's what we think each time the flu mutates and we get a worse strain coming around that year, and they say, we've got to do something a little bit extra because this one's extra deadly. They don't say, oh no, this one's extra virulent. It's going around and spreading and triple the people are getting it. That's never been the point when it comes to others. So yeah, from the beginning, this whole thing should have been focused on, we're trying to prevent death and serious illness and debilitation after illness. That's the goal. But now that it's all about cases, and it continues to be about cases, that metric doesn't really matter. Now, of course, it is important if it is a deadlier strain. Now, if you've seen the reports coming out that it's the Lambda variant's coming, and this is something that I've been watching for the last month and a half, and now even Newsweek came out yesterday saying Lambda, everybody's kind of getting into that. And that one is looking right now to kind of potentially be more vaccine resistant. And so, if something comes around and it is deadlier, if it does start to attack younger people and children, that is definitely cause for alarm. But at this point, just the simple number of cases is not. We have to see those hospitalizations and severe cases rise in order for us to say panic time.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. And, I think it's good to point out, though, that as we are having all of these debates here about how we handle COVID, should masks be back in place? Like, should we have all these lockdown procedures? Republicans are making what I think is an actually somewhat fair point about the southern border, which is there's a big problem there with COVID. You've seen tents set up in McAllen, Texas, to deal with the overflow of migrants. There is numerous positive, COVID cases. I think McAllen's at a 10% positivity rate because of, the migrant flow that they're dealing with. And if you've ever been to McAllen, Texas, it literally sits right on the border. You can see Mexico. It's a very Sarah Palin moment, except you can see Mexico from your house. And so they're dealing with a legitimate crisis there. And as far as I can tell, there is nothing the White House, is doing about it. They're not, they're quarantining these migrants in McAllen before they're then sending them out to the rest of the country. Well, a lot of them are COVID positive. So in my mind, there's a lot of incoherence around this strategy to, tell Americans you can't do something even after you've been vaccinated because you might spread COVID, but then not apply the same standard to people that are coming across the border. Although I will say, in fairness to the Biden administration, they are not undoing Trump's public health Title 42, which allows them faster deportation. I know progressives probably have a feeling about that. So they are, I guess, trying in that regard. But to me, this seems like a totally incoherent messaging strategy, one that Biden's potential rivals will pick up on. I think we have a shot of Ron DeSantis talking about this yesterday.
Why don't you do your job? Why don't you get this border secure? And until you do that, I don't want to hear a blip about COVID from you. Thank you.
So, Kim, I don't know. What do you think? Fair hit or not?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, we now know from how this virus spreads that if you can clamp down on your borders, then you can contain your population. We've seen this happen in Australia, New Zealand, and arguably China. But with these, just like what I was saying about Lambda's coming. We've known about this variant coming around and surrounding and circulating in Peru and now throughout South America. And there was an opportunity to potentially close the borders down before new variants entered into the United States. People are constantly blaming the unvaccinated for these new variants, but actually we haven't had a new variant stem from the United States. They're coming from outside the country. So if we want to stop the spread of these highly contagious or potentially deadlier variants, then it makes sense that we would close down the borders. And that was a criticism against Trump. And now I think it's a fair criticism against Joe Biden.
Yeah. And look, I mean, we've seen record numbers of crossings at the border, and Republicans are picking up on this. The Biden administration has really kind of said nothing. But, if you don't think this is going to be a talking point for Republicans, you just haven't been paying attention to them for the last 10 years. I think it's something they are going to focus on, I think, aggressively coming into 2022 and those congressional campaigns. So, whether it's sincere or not almost doesn't matter because it's a talking point for them from here on out. But I think with that, welcome, and we'll tell you what's on our radars next.